Oh, no, I'm just. Okay, you guys ready? Time. Good evening. Welcome to the Haldane Central School District Annual Reorganization Meeting. Can we all please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Trustee Clements? Here. Trustee Clementson?
Here.
Trustee Headland?
Here.
Trustee Valentine?
Here.
And Trustee McNall is absent tonight. I'd like to take this moment to have Dr. Benante approach the microphone for take his oath of office.
Do I raise the right hand?
Raise your hand.
Okay. I, Philip Benante, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the Office of Superintendent of the Haldane Central School District according to the best of my ability.
Okay. And now I'll take my.
Please, Ms. Platt.
I, Catherine Platt, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the Office of District Clerk of the Haldane Central School District according to the best of my ability. And now I'd like to welcome Trustee Clementson to the mic for his oath of office.
Okay. I, Ezra Clementson, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of Haldane Board of Education trustee according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to call for the nomination and election of our president for this term.
He's not here, but I'd like to nominate Sean McNall. What? Yeah, so, I mean, just for the folks watching at home, you know, when Sean actually stepped up to be vice president recently, it was really with an intention to be president, and I think Sean has really demonstrated just a lot of wisdom and a real concern for all students in the district, as well as just really carrying out his responsibilities as a board trustee with just the utmost thoughtfulness and, you know, ethical orientation, and I think he'd be a really good president. So I'm making a motion for Sean McNall to be president.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, congratulations, Sean. I would like to call for the nomination and election of a vice president.
I'd like to nominate Peggy. Have you ever been an officer?
I have been vice president. I was vice president for a year.
Okay,
yes.
way back when.
Yes,
All
and
right.
at this point, you know, I've been on the board for, at this point, 8 years, so feel pretty up to the task, so, yeah.
Absolutely. And especially given I think this is your last year, is this right? Or last year of this term. just
My
in
last
case-
year of this term, and I reserve the right to run again.
I think,
Don't try to get rid of me yet.
okay, there we go. I like that. I think it's important to have as all of us are relatively new. Even myself, I feel relatively new. The institutional knowledge that you bring to this is really important. And I think will be important to Sean as well, given his status. So, I nominate Peggy Clements.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Peggy, can I ask you to step up to the microphone and take your oath of office?
Oh, yes. Oh, thanks. Make it right. I, Margaret Clements, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of Haldane Board of Education Vice President according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And now, Peggy, if you'd like to switch seats with me and take control of the meeting.
I know 2 years ago I said I wasn't going to run, and here I am, Vice President. Times change. Don't ever think things stay stagnant. Okey doke. So I'm just looking where we are. So now we need to appoint the district clerk, the district pro tem, the district treasurer, the tax collector, and the claims auditor. I think we start by you reading the motion. Yeah, the resolution first, or the recommended action.
Be it resolved that the Board of Education appoints the following officers of the Board of Education effective July 1st, 2022 through to the July 2023 annual reorganization meeting at the stipends noted. District Clerk Catherine Platt, Clerk Pro Tem School Business Manager, District Treasurer, School Business Manager, Tax Collector Myra Stoner, and Claims Auditor Melissa Harris.
May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. I think there's there's really nothing for us to discuss, so, yes. Well, no, oh, actually there is, because we don't have a named business manager. I was thinking that, yeah.
We're listing the position here. The individual who is appointed to the school business manager role, we will then resolve at a future meeting date for them to formally fill this role. We've reviewed this with our attorneys. We can use the title of the position as a placeholder for now. And actually, in my comments, when we get there, I'll speak a little bit as to our anticipated timeline for filling that position.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So the next item on the agenda is comments from the school board president. I will say I do not have any comments prepared, except that I am excited to be here starting a new year with a new board. And I think it's the reorg meeting can be a little bit dry sometimes, but it's actually great to have Ezra. Really happy that Maggie's starting her second year, so really looking forward to working with you all this year. I have to read this for a second. Yes. The Board of Education, so here's a notice. The Board of Education will meet in executive session for the board retreat on Tuesday, July 26th at 4 p.m. So that will be executive session just for the board. And then the next Board of Education business meeting will be held on August 23rd, 2022 at 7 p.m. here in the auditorium. All right. So tonight, as part of the reorganization meeting, we have public hearings for 3 different plans and documents that are part of what helps run the district. So right now, what I'd like to do is open the public hearing for the Haldane Central School District District Safety and Emergency Management Plan for the 22-23 school year. Do any of us have anything we want to say about that?
I just have a question. I think in the content for the elementary school one, the class schedules, I think, need to be updated. The elementary school, the class schedules.
Ah.
Isn't there a class listing at the very back?
Yes.
I think the high school one is updated. I think the elementary school is last year or the year before or something like that. And I assume it's actually not done yet, and it will be
Right.
amended at the end of the.
Thank you for
So-
catching that.
So is that something that needs to be changed, or?
The board can still resolve to accept later on in the meeting the plan with a note that that will be changed
Okay,
after the meeting.
okay, all right,
It does not have to present board action on the plan.
okay, perfect. All right, so I'm now closing the public hearing for the Haldane Central School District Safety and Emergency Management Plan for the 22-23 school year. And I'm now going to open the public hearing for the Haldane Central School District Code of Conduct for the 22-23 school year. Anybody have anything they want to comment? Nope. All right, so I'm now going to close the public hearing for the Code of Conduct for the 22-23 school year and open the public hearing for the Haldane Central School District Extracurricular Code of Conduct for the 22-23 school year.
A procedural question and not
Yeah.
a content question. Remind me, there is a committee, Code of Conduct Committee, that will review both of these, because they both fall under that committee, over the course of the year. If there are any changes that are suggested to be made, either regulation or process, they'd be done so with that committee.
Correct.
Yep, great.
Yeah, and so actually we have a representative on that committee. I'm that person.
Yep.
I actually was pretty good at attending most of the meetings, but not all of them. And I have to admit, toward the end of the year, I know there's been talk for actually combining these documents at one point, and I, for work travel, missed toward the end. So Phil, can you explain why do you know from Mrs. Sniffen why these are still separate documents? And I know there was some real confusion as to, there was a real rationale going back historically about why we wanted to have this separate code of conduct for extracurriculars. And then at one point there'd been hope that we could combine them, but then there was also concern that combining them was actually kind of confusing because there's actually somewhat different expectations in the extracurricular code of conduct. And so I think obviously where the committee landed was to keep them separate.
Yeah, I think you hit on all the key points there. So at some point, the extracurricular code of conduct was created. That did not always exist. That predates my time here. I think it was just before, actually, where the extracurricular code of conduct was created. There was discussion, or has been discussion over the last couple of years, about whether or not these two documents can be combined, because they have a similar intent behind them, but their scope is different. Obviously, they pertain to students who, at different moments in time, and who are engaged in different types of activities. So ultimately, the group has decided not to make a recommendation to combine them, although I wouldn't be surprised if some point in the future, that's a conversation that we're having once again. But for now, they'll sit as separate documents.
And as long as the same committee is overseeing both of them,
They are.
if there's changes to one that need to be incorporated in the other, you can do it. Somebody's watching both.
Correct. And it's important to remember that the district code of conduct somewhat supersedes
Yes.
everything.
Yep.
So, and I think this was not to introduce any nuance to this was something that was the beginnings of discussing whether or not they should be combined. In that, does the district code of conduct provide the appropriate scope, or could it, over extracurricular activities? Again, ultimately, the committee landed on keeping them separate for now.
I mean, it's interesting. One of the things we're going to talk about in the board evaluation later on is this issue of communication and hearing from the community. So I was on the board when Dr. Bowers recommended that we have this extracurricular code of conduct, and it actually really came from community concern, wish, desire, that students who participate in extracurricular activities are held to a higher standard, and that there is something codified about what that standard is to make sure that there's equity across sports, across athletics, and other, and drama or other kinds of extracurricular activities. So this document really did, it was, and the board obviously concurred. The desire for the document really came from a concern from the committee. So there's some evidence of listening, and opportunities, like folks stating something and it being heard. So, but yeah, again, sitting the first couple of meetings that I attended, it's like, how do you have a code of conduct, but then in that code of conduct, in that same one document, lay out two different sets of expectations? And so it makes sense, I think, to keep them separate until we can figure out a good way to combine them. All right.
Thank you.
Yep. So I'm now, there are no other comments. The public hearing for the Haldane Central School District extracurricular code of conduct for the 22-23 school year is now closed. Comments from Dr. Benante?
Sure, just a few. Congratulations to Ezra, Peggy, and Sean for your respective roles coming into the school year. As you can see, it's a busy start to the summer. As you entered the building, you'll see that Tim's staff has been quite busy clearing out our classrooms and beginning to get them prepared for September. There's also some other site-based work that's planned through the summer months, and I just wanted to acknowledge Tim and his team for the hard work that's going on right now to begin to prepare our schools for the fall, for the return of students. Just a few updates for the board. I'm working with Lynn Allen from PNW BOCES, as well as John McCarthy, who's now retired, but to help in facilitating the board retreat that's scheduled later this month. Lynn and John have engaged with the board. Some of you have been on the board for a few years periodically in the past. I know 4 years ago we brought them in at 2 separate times, and I thought it would be a good time to bring them in again just to help facilitate that conversation, because it can be difficult for whoever's involved to be both a facilitator and an active participant. So having Lynn will be fully available on that day. John's helping with some of the preparations behind the scenes, just to help facilitate the dialogue and the agenda that we have set for the board retreat later this month. I wanted to make note that we are in the process of either hiring or determining next steps for 2 important administrative positions in the district, that of the school business manager and the athletic director. I will have a recommendation prepared over the course of the next day or so for both of those positions. I'll work with Sean and Peggy in determining what the board desires as their role in being for the appointment of those individuals. Typically, the board's met with finalists beforehand, and if that's what the board desires to do, I would move that we actually, if we can on the 26th, before we go into retreat, if we can have an opportunity to meet candidates, if that's of interest to the board, and then potentially have a business meeting, a short business meeting to actually appoint. So I'll work with Peggy and Sean on that. It's just important, given the board meeting schedule in the summer is not meeting as frequently, that we get these positions filled. And I feel confident about the individuals or the recommendation that I have. But again, I want the board to be comfortable with that. So I'll work with Peggy and Sean on that. And I just want to make a note, if we could at all meet earlier on the 26th prior to retreat, that would be helpful. Just as you begin to examine your calendars. If not, we'll find another date, and we'll move from there.
So in terms of meeting earlier, should we expect like an email from Megan asking us to meet? And
Yes.
Because we'd really actually, if we're going to meet with both folks and have a short business meeting, we'd probably need to meet an hour and a half earlier. I think so.
So I first want to talk to you and Sean just to kind of give you the lay of the land, and then determine at that time when you feel we should meet.
Okay.
How much time may be necessary
Sounds good.
after we talk through that.
Sounds good.
But you're correct, we may need up to an hour and a half, I guess, if
To
we're going to meet
two
with
folks
both
and have a
individuals, right?
business meeting, yes. Thanks.
Okay. And then some work related to the campus master plan continues. I just wanted to point out that CS Arch has launched a survey just as another means of capturing community input. There will be notices in the local papers this week regarding that survey. It was distributed through our email listserv last week, but again, we want to have as broad community input as possible. And I also think that CS Arch put the constructs in place to get good analysis of a demographic sample, whether it be a community member, external to the school, internal to the school, and such, and some other important information perhaps to collect as we sit with that information eventually and determine the feedback that the community has provided. This complements the many meetings that CS Arch has already had with stakeholders over the course of the past 6 weeks after their appointment. And I know their goal is in the fall to begin to coalesce around a few themes that have emerged that can be incorporated into actual designs that at that point will begin to be presented to the Campus Master Planning Committee for feedback before they're moved forward to the board. So that process just continues to move along. CS Arch has been good partners in this work, and a note to our community to be on the lookout for that survey and to please complete it. It takes about 10 minutes. I completed it, and I feel like I was pretty detailed in my comments in the comment boxes, and it was under 10 minutes for me. So not everybody's going to give it as much time, and it should take no more than 10 minutes of your time.
Sorry, can I ask
Yep.
a quick question on that? I think I heard what you said, but I'm not sure. Survey, they're going to begin design after that?
So
Is it-
the
what's
survey
it-
collection will
Yeah.
take place. They also have 2 community engagement sessions.
Okay, okay.
One is scheduled for next Wednesday.
Okay.
Sorry I didn't mention that. It's next Wednesday evening. We did set up an RSVP. Just we know it's the
Yep.
time of the year where
Yep.
folks may be checked out. That being said, the community engagement session is there. They're going to host a second one in the fall.
Okay.
And then they're continuing to meet with our leadership group in between that time.
Yep.
And they're using all the information that's collected over the sessions they've had, the sessions they're scheduled to have, and the survey tool to begin to shape their design work
Okay.
that is done.
Okay.
And that's anticipated to occur in the fall.
Okay. Great.
I was actually just looking on the website to make sure, because about the community forum. So those are, if people are interested, the dates for those are on that show up on the district calendar on the homepage. Okay, great.
And you may recall, this is my last comment, that we completed a school climate survey in the late spring. That survey closed. I began working with Panorama last week on the analysis end of those survey results. It's quite comprehensive. It's a lot of information. It's good information. I do plan to have that available to the board over the course of the next month. If there's room at the retreat, I would love to get into it a little bit at that time, but once the agenda's set, I think we'll have a better idea. If not, we can push it off for a workshop session in the early fall. But I do just want to make note that the survey is closed, the results are there. We need to process that a little bit on the administrative end, as well as I want to make sure the board is well versed in it before we make it public in any way. But I do feel that it will be helpful in guiding our improvement efforts in the future. That concludes my remarks.
Oh, great. Sorry about that. Thank you. I can't remember. Does Jen read the communication from the public? I guess so. She does. You should read the whole statement, even if no one's here.
Actually, I don't think she does if no one is here.
No one is here.
No,
Okay,
I
because
think
it
she
feels a little
scans
silly.
the audience and sees
Okay,
that
all right.
no one is here.
Okay. So if we had folks at our meeting tonight, oh, am I too loud? Sorry. No. If we had folks at our meeting tonight, I would invite comments from the public, but it's a intimate group this evening. So we will now go into information reports. So item I on the agenda are the information reports, our financial reports from May and June. These are the financial reports that we will act on at the next business meeting. which will be in August. The next item is minutes from our June 21st meeting. And I think since it's a consent agenda, I just asked for a motion. Okay, may I have a motion to approve the minutes from our June 21st
So
meeting?
moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next is consent agenda financial. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And consent agenda personnel. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
This is everything. This is all the stuff.
It's a lot there.
Yeah, so we do have, I actually won't go right into the vote right away. So this is really, a lot of what we're here to do today is actually appoint many of these positions for the coming year. Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Did I asked for a motion, right? Yes, I did.
You did
Yeah.
ask for a motion.
Any opposed? All right. Okay. And so the next is our conversation about our board self-evaluation. And so I guess what we decided was to go ahead and have this conversation now rather than wait to do it at a later meeting so that we would have a chance to sort of go into our retreat with this having been concluded. And it could help, I think, going into the retreat both helps inform, give Dr. Benante information that he might need or want to develop the district goals, and then for us also to develop our own goals. That is what you had, that's what your email said, John,
Yes.
right? That you did want us to go ahead and have this conversation tonight.
Yeah. I was just going back and looking through all of and just wanted to make sure that nobody had any questions or Dr. Benante didn't have any commentary on any of the appointments under personnel.
I was just going to make note and welcome 2 new teachers to our
Okay.
district, but that's okay. I had the opportunity to meet Sam and Caitlin last week, and I know they're both very excited about joining the Haldane community. They have a lot to offer our community, and I'm really excited for our students to meet them. So I just wanted to, again, welcome Sam and Caitlin. I look forward to seeing them both at our new teacher orientation in the fall, and thank our administrative team and the teachers who were involved in the hiring process. I know everybody was really enthused about having such high quality and enthusiastic candidates for both of these positions. So welcome again, Caitlin and Sam, to Haldane.
And if I remember correctly, both of those are coming out of the budget decisions in the spring, right?
So one is, just to clarify, so the board moved to include or expand a music position, which was part-time to full-time. So the procedural action tonight was to abolish the part-time position, create the full-time probationary position, and then appoint Sam into that position, which is what you've done. The social studies position was due to a resignation. Melissa Seidman is moving, and that created the opening in social studies.
Oh, right. I was thinking about the, okay, yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you.
Did we take the vote on that? I'm so sorry. I'm so new to this. We did.
Sorry,
That's
I went
okay.
out
It's
of
okay.
order. I apologize.
It's like-
I pulled this back. All right, self-evaluation, you want to chat? Peggy, is that where you want to go?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yep.
All right. So I think I shared the self-evaluation with everybody except for potentially you, because I'm not sure that I have your new address, but I can send it to you even as we spoke. All right, perfect. So I think at this point everybody has a chance to read through it. I made a couple of suggestions for the high-level areas that I think discussion was worthwhile. One was standard 1, which is vision accountability, and one other piece. The second one was on our communication strategy, which we continually have questions about. I think there have been a lot of really good discussions and like questions from the community as to how we can be more potentially interactive. Maybe interactive is not the right word, but accommodating may be the right word in terms of recognizing people who come to the meeting and have questions for us, realizing, however, it's interesting, I had a conversation this weekend with a husband of a friend of my wife's, who is a principal and a superintendent down in Delaware, and he said, again, you've probably heard at this point now, that the Board of Ed meeting is a meeting for the board to which the public is invited. So how do we accommodate and understand and realize that while still providing some more potential for communication or transparency or X? That seems to be the theme. I'm not here to provide solutions or recommendations, but those are the things that I think have come up in the conversation. So I'd open it up to the floor to anyone who has either comments or suggestions or things that we want to focus on. I would or at least my suggestion was, not necessarily here to make any decisions today. We also have our retreat, which I hope that this will be a part of, in terms of what are the tactics we want to do, start coming out of this. But maybe today we raise any key issues that people have either commented on themselves, make sure that we're aligned on the areas we want to address, and then during the course of our retreat on the 26th, we sort of work out, all right, what are we going to do about it? If that makes sense. Cool? All right.
The one other thing actually that I would like us to talk about specifically, which is an item that we decided to keep in the evaluation after questioning whether we would keep it, is our role, and I'd have to look, regarding it's actually 3E, the board is an advocate for the district's issues with legislators and other public officials. And we're actually kind of all over the board on that. So that's another thing that I'd like us to speak specifically to about.
Do you want to start there, and then, because that may be easier, and then we can dive into communication stuff?
We could.
Okay.
We could. So I'm just trying to think about. So the way this has worked previously is the board actually didn't do much. I mean, I'm thinking really about being involved in advocating for policy and legislation, which is how I view that item. So one of the things, I haven't talked about it, I didn't talk about it this past year, but a major effort that the New York State School Board Association engages in every year is developing a whole agenda of legislative efforts that it wants to undertake. And there's a process through which that happens. So they sort of send out a survey that I feel like we get sometime in the winter that sort of asks us to weigh in on this. I don't know if any of us ever complete that survey. And then before the annual conference, they then send out to every district the whole list of all the different legislative efforts that they want NYSBA members to vote on as to whether or not NYSBA should pursue them. Yep. And it's big, and I've actually had the opportunity twice. I've actually gone to NYSBA conferences and have represented Haldane as the voting member. And so it's a fascinating process to hear. But it's actually nothing that we've really ever engaged in systematically. And so, and it's super, super informative, right? And NYSBA is really the organization that is legislating for school boards. And so if this is something, so there's two routes we could take. One would be to continue to allow this to be an individually driven decision. If you want to, read about these things, be the person that participates with NYSBA to go do the state legislator advocacy meeting. I can't remember exactly what it's called. It's in February. If you want to be actively engaged with either, Putnam, Northern Westchester BOCES or something like that, like you could do it on your own, or we can make a decision and actually plan to set aside, and I don't know if could be part of a workshop meeting or something like that, to literally take, to commit to reading this list of resolutions that NYSBA wants its members to vote on, whether or not, And then it would be up to us, do we want to send somebody to the conference? Like, there's money for people to go to represent us. Or if we don't do that, then by default, our vote is sort of whatever the majority decides. But it is a way to be, I think, really well informed about what the range of issues are, if this is something that we really do want to evaluate ourselves on. So that's my thinking about this.
I think that's just interesting to think about. I might have to go track down the past year and see what type of issues they tackle for big picture. But isn't there also a flip side? The board is an advocate for the district's interests with legislatures locally. So and I don't know what the examples would be, although I can think of maybe some of this campus planning where we have to share some space. Is that also sort of a?
Yeah, so that would be the only other thing I would add is considering this more on a local level. The NYSBA process is a piece of that pie. The WIPSPA has a mechanism for engaging with local legislators as well. It's another piece of that pie, if you will. And then I think the board's efforts to engage more locally with elected officials, whether it be our state senator or assembly person, is also a component of that. We're a small board, so in larger boards, there may be one or two members who have an interest in this level of work, and it gets distributed, in that way. I empathize, I guess, to a degree with the role board members may be, where we have all these other committee structures, and there's only 5 trustees really to engage on our internal efforts, and then whatever external efforts we make as well. So if the board wants to get more, there's ample opportunity to bring our legislators in. If we want to distribute this a little more, I would lean more towards the efforts that Peggy's discussing, where it could just simply be one member liaising, if you will, with a larger group that takes it on for us to a degree. That's what our membership dues for WIPSPA and NYSBA are partially for, is to let them do the heavy lifting, if you will. But I think there's always room to bring our legislators in, or any other local officials with whom we interact to discuss about issues specific to Haldane, which can get lost in some of these other forum that may lean more towards the general issues that are facing all schools in New York State, not the specific issue that Haldane may have.
Right. Yes, and I misspoke, I think, when I was talking about the local school board representing organization, which is WIPSPA, right, which Jen was a member,
Jen was an active participant on, and I believe one of the board members, I think it's Sarah from Garrison, and I hope I'm not misspeaking, but I think Sarah is now taking an active role in WIPSA, which is a good thing because we have a nice relationship with Garrison, and I think a liaison there in Garrison and Haldane are similar in several ways. I trust that Sarah could bring concerns that we would have to WIPSPA and liaise with us in that way.
I'm not going to remember the organization for which I sat on this meeting, but it was fascinating. It was, I assume, either NYSBA or WISPA. The reading of the resolutions, who they were proposed by, and it was basically for the people on the advocacy board, the legislative board, the committee to recommend what they were going to put forward or not put forward. That process was fascinating. So I would suggest that if nothing else, we have someone, I sat in for Jen, who couldn't make it, so I assume that Sean would be doing that on behalf of the board this year. But I would definitely recommend that those be brought back to the board just as an educational, because some of the stuff brought up, some of the recommendations and the proposals brought up issues that I hadn't thought of, not necessarily germane here, but really interesting to make sure that we're cognizant of everything that's going on and what different school districts are advocating for in legislation. So I think that just as so we have a better understanding of what are the major issues that other districts and potentially ourselves are facing, and if we would choose to weigh in on those, I think that would be a good thing to add as an agenda item sometime in the appropriate time of the year. Inform the board of what those are, maybe have maybe not through every single recommended action, but for the ones that are maybe important, have somebody report back on. I think that'd be great. It was certainly educational for me. I had no idea what half of them were, so I basically sat on the call and listened for a lot, but I thought that was really useful.
I mean, it maybe never occurs to us. I'm also realizing I actually met with Ezra over the weekend in preparation for this meeting, and I wish I had thought to actually even share with him the document that we're looking at. So my apologies for not doing that. We can meet again. I can show it to you. Yeah, because that, Phil brings up a really good point. So to get at Maggie's point, like, maybe it's something that we want to be cognizant about. Like, when there's something that we think there's an issue that's relevant for us to speak to our assembly person or our state senator, we could do that. I'll be honest, it's never occurred to me.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's more what I'm thinking, more like not micro issues for us, but.
And actually, there is the town historically has a liaison to the school board. In the past, it was Judy Farrell, and she did come to some meetings before the pandemic. I mean, I'm sure there's other things that they're dealing with. And so maybe that's a conversation to have. I mean, I don't know, does it make sense for you to reach out to the board and ask who the liaison is? And if they, it is? That person could come to a school board meeting, I guess makes sense. I don't know how that would work. But yeah.
I think between now and the retreat as well, I can give this some more thought and think through the different layers or pieces, if you will, that are in place, just to make sure we see them all perhaps on one visual, whatever it may be. And then it would be good for the board to really sit with, where do we want to direct your time and attention to? Is it on the state policy level or all the way down through the more hyper-local level, given what the district's efforts are and the agenda is over the course of the next year. And I can see where the board may want to direct its full attention more on a local level for 1 year, because there's a feeling that there's just more of a need there. Whereas in other years, the board may wish to direct all their attention at a state policy level and direct their efforts there. And we may fall somewhere in between. But I think seeing it all and hearing a little bit more about what's on, and creating the space to talk a little bit more about what's on the agenda for the district this year may help direct where we want to give our continued time and energy to from a legislative advocacy perspective.
Yeah, no, and I think, since it's something we're really starting in a formal way, I think taking an initial step makes a lot of sense. Well, since we're on communication and community relations, do we want to just, John, I don't want to take over your conversation, but does it make sense for us to stay here? I don't want to take over your process.
Absolutely.
But
Let's talk about communication.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because there were lots of really good comments on that. I think there's some interesting, I think that's a place where we could, I think we're going to come out with we need to think about what we do from a communication perspective. So I don't know what those tactics are going to be, but any input on like general feelings, communication from what we're hearing from the community, what we think has been done before or hasn't been done before, what our objective is in responding to the things that have been raised. I think that would be
So this is a conversation for people who've been paying attention. The board has had for years, as long as I've been on the board. And it's really tricky because it's not the board, and it's hard to figure out what, I guess there's two ways to look at it. It seems like that the community feels dissatisfied with the communication that we can offer. And I don't know, but then it's also really challenging because it's not, from my perspective, it's not, I don't know what people want to hear, and it could be that they want to hear that things that it's not right for us to share, right? Another way for us to look at this would be how do we want to change how we're communicating? So at one point relatively recently, and I know it's not always a satisfying answer to the community, but that, everything that we have to communicate is available on board docs and is discussed at meetings. Mm-hmm. And what should we do other than that? To have a dialogue with the community, to me feels weird, because then you're relying on one person speaking, but then that person is speaking as an individual, not as a board member. And so those kinds of opportunities, to me, seem fraught with potential problems, right?
Right.
And I agree with that. There's not an easy solution to that. I do know that, one specific issue, and this is just one microscopic point of this whole conversation, is when they do show up, the public, a couple of people have said, when somebody from the public asks a question, and, the response, when it has been, we will get back to you, which, as far as I know from either the board president or the superintendent, you always do.